What I want you to get out of today's video is that you can look at a model A grade answer and have the confidence that you can do better. That you see the model answer and you realize it's not that difficult. We'll go through the examiner's comments, work out what they've done well and what they could improve on. And then you know this is what A or A star looks like, and that you can reproduce that. Once we've taken a look at the model answer, we will take a look at some basic do's and don'ts from the exam board, stuff that you already know, but it's always worth reminding, and it'll just give you some confidence before you go into the exam that you know exactly what you're doing. Good luck. Okay, the first thing that CIE asks you to do when you turn over the exam paper and you have a look at the question is to highlight the keywords in the question. So this one is from the City Planners by Margaret Atwood. It tells you here that it was in the June 2015 paper. And the question is, to what extent does Atwood make you feel that human activities are pointless in the city planners? And this is their advice as to what those keywords mean. To what extent? This question asks you to consider and evaluate the extent that the writer communicates the focus of the question. And then it breaks that down even further. The question is asking us how much Atwood communicates and emphasizes her ideas about the pointlessness of human activity in her poem. It asks us to evaluate and think about how she has used language and structural devices to express the key idea or theme throughout the poem. And then it breaks it down even further, tells you what to do. Select quotations that in some way show types of human activity are pointless. That's straightforward enough. Explain what each quotation means with reference to the idea, and then pick out keywords or phrases that makes the reader feel, show how the reader feels about this idea, which then refers to that second part there. So first thing, look at the question, annotate the key words in the question, because that's what you will refer to in your answer. So let's take a look at the student's answer. It tells us here, this one received the equivalent of an A grade. This is the answer on the left, and these are the examiner's comments on the right. In Atwood's The City Planner, there is a sense of pointlessness, and the examiner says, a brief introduction. It attempts to lay out the focus of the question and what that means. And then the introduction continues here. This is expressed by many different ways, these being very effective in making the reader perceive a look of use for human activity. And the examiner is not too happy about that, and quite right. You know, the introduction at this point becomes quite general, and as a result of this, it does not meet any of the assessment objectives. So the first sentence was enough. It seems to be that you don't need to do any extended introduction, or if you have got time for that, then maybe do what, how, and why. What is the way that you're going to tackle the poem? How has the author communicated that, and why? What are they trying to do? So let's take a look at our first paragraph. Firstly, the point which is easiest to identify is the way Atwood expresses her belief that nature will overcome the suburbs. So that's quite a nice topic sentence, and they've mentioned it there. And then they've gone on to say for number 3, go straight into the quotation. This is shown is not necessary. So I guess they're really getting you to trim down words. Personally, I would suggest you could contextualize your quote, but that's your choice. Here is the quote. Future cracks in the plaster. By expressing this, Atwood makes the reader feel like there is no point in any human activity, as nature will eventually destroy the suburb. And then we get some examiner's comments. This is a relevant quotation, but it comes from stanza 3. Respond with quotations in chronological order. And that's pretty good advice. You know, they're telling you work through the poem chronologically and try to respond to every section of the text in passage-based questions. So if you've taken an extract question for drama or prose, try and respond to everything that's in there. And then they say something about the quotation. It's clearly and carefully explained. The candidate supports their ideas with reason, but there is a lack of development. So let's think what she could have said, this candidate. Well, future cracks in the plaster. Plaster hints at man-made structures. There hints at the usually inside houses, our dwelling places, our homes. These are not safe. Nature is going to reclaim them. It's like the future cracks represent the destruction of man-made dwellings by the natural environment or the reclaiming forces of nature. And that would have just given it a little bit more. She could have picked out the key word plaster there, for example, as it told us to do in the advice. This paragraph really continues here. It's not a topic sentence, it's just an introduction of another quote. It's not a great contextualization of the quote, so if you're after a star, contextualize that quote better. And so here we go. Houses capsized will slide. This is a very effective way of describing the poet's view of the future, as it uses direct, harsh language, which makes the reader realize what will happen. This is because the verb will, by using it, the writer describes the future in a way which is sure, like she has no doubt. So here's the examiner's comment, and basically they're saying it's underdeveloped. Her analysis of the keyword will is not particularly riveting. And then the student does go on and say something about the word capsize. Let's take a look at that. Additionally, the word capsized personates the houses and makes the reader sense hopelessness for the future. Like the houses had no other choice but to side, the sense of hopelessness makes the reader realize people living in the suburbs can't do anything about nature overcoming men, thus feeling worthless and their actions pointless. Now that's a little bit better. The candidate makes an attempt to comment on the effects of individual words and phrases. An appreciation of imagery is evident, even though they name it as personification. Effects are explored and some understanding is evident. The ideas are relevant to the question, but lack detailed reasons to support this answer. So to improve on that, you could say something about the word capsized. Capsize is generally used when a ship keels over. It's a subversion of the order. So the student could have picked out houses capsized. It's almost as though the order is subverted. Instead of having man-made environment or man-made culture, nature will reclaim it. And it's also, if you take it as sea imagery, it's like the flood myth, isn't it? That the waters will come back, nature will come back and reclaim what was originally its. So you could have added a little bit more detail like that. Let's find a paragraph that the examiner is quite pleased with. Let's go for this one down here. So here's the examiner's comment, and then we'll look at the paragraph. There is a clear understanding of the poem and its deeper implications here. The candidate states that the planner's activities are pointless because of the absolute control they have over the lives of everyday people. So let's have a look how she expressed that. Moreover, Atwood describes the city planners as people who control nature and plot their suburbs inflexibly. So that's the topic sentence. Sketch transitory lines rigid as wooden borders. This makes the people in the suburbs feel controlled by the planners. As they are controlled, it feels pointless to take part in human activity, as in the end, they will only do what the city planners make them do. And then another example of the city planners controlling their lifestyle, and then we get the quote here. This is where the city planners tracing the panic of the suburbs. The suburbs is personified by being related to its panic. The personification helps to relate to the citizens in the suburbs, as it is them who feel the sense of panic. Okay, so she's saying that the panic in the suburbs is really felt by the citizens, and it's those who feel the lack of control. She finishes off the paragraph by saying that this is the city planners that trace or create this panic, is referring to the control they have over the population. This sense of panic is indirectly sensed through the whole poem and links to the theme of discomfort within the order. And so the argument here at 13, The arguments are developed and there is some explanation of the effects of language choices. So keywords, key phrases have been picked out and they've been explored with reference to the question. The examiner says, well, it's a little bit repetitive. Rather than pointing out new points, they're repeating the old points. Well, let's just see how this finishes off here. This is the conclusion. So remember, the examiner was not that happy with the introduction. They felt there was a little bit too much waffle in there. A simple one line would have done the job. And here's their comment on the conclusion. Overall, this poem describes human activity as pointless, mainly because of the lack of life presented in the poem, but also because of the sense of hopelessness for the future. And the examiner says, the conclusion is quite general and misses the opportunity to interpret the text in relation to the candidate's opinions about the poet's messages and themes. So instead of just offering a brief summary, evaluate. How successful is it? You know, that was the key word in the question when they broke down to what extent. So do you feel that Atwood has successfully communicated a sense of hopelessness? If so, why? If not, why not? So hopefully you take a look at that and you think, it's not that difficult. That's an A grade and it's something that you could do. Okay, so if you've got this far, you can have some bonus tips from the exam board. These are things you probably know you should be doing and shouldn't be doing, but it never harms to be reminded. Let's take a look. Make a key note or make a note of the keywords in the question. That's straightforward and that's good advice for any exam. Answer the question set, not the one you would have preferred to answer. You know, it's text and question. You know, this is the text that you're referring to, and this is the specific question that you're answering. Make a plan. Okay, that's straightforward enough. Okay, use many brief quotations to support your argument. Note the word brief. You're not asking for whole verses, just brief quotations that you put in there. Analyze the key words in your quotations, showing how writers achieve their effects. So you know, this would explain the quote and then pick out the key word that you want to, or phrase or device that you want to elaborate on. Write legibly, that's always good advice. In English, I don't know if they're being sarcastic here, and make it as clear and accurate as you can. Okay, here's some also good tips. Don't bother copying out the question. Don't spend too long planning. This is a 45-minute response, 7 minutes max planning. Don't waste time on lengthy introductions or background material. If it's not relevant, you won't be given any points for that. Don't just simply tell the story. Don't repeat yourself. You won't receive any more marks. Here, this means if you say this is personification, that's not enough. You've got to say what the personification is doing. What's the effect of the personification on the reader? Something like that. Don't use very long quotations. It's better to use a series of shorter quotations. There you go. Don't try to write about everything. They know it's not possible. And part of the skill is to pick out the key points that are going to support your argument. Okay. Good luck.